Hello, welcome to Wednesday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. I am over the moon to be joined by the one and only
You're not over the moon.
Keith Jackson. Well, actually, before we start,
What?
Celtic Scott McDermott was giving you it tight yesterday,
Aye,
but no turning up. Where is he?
Well, exactly. You know, the best will in the world, Daniel. I think I was performing a service, doing something very important, giving something back to people the other night. I don't know what Scott's got on for himself tonight. What kind of self-indulgence he's deciding that is more important than coming to his work in the studio. Not that he ever comes to the studio anyway either, right enough, but there you are. I'm a one-man band in here and I'm perfectly used to it, but now.
Listen, if he can sleep at night, that's
Well,
all
exactly.
That's all that
It's
matters.
for his conscience.
Well, as it's only the two of us tonight, I thought I would put it out to the listeners as well.
Just
A little bit of a
another-
question and answer session. What's that?
Nothing. Nothing. I nearly made the mistake of breaking into song.
Well, aye, we could do that if you want. That would
Nah,
get good
no.
numbers on YouTube.
No, it won't.
Aye, if you're watching, please hit us up with any questions or queries that you have.
Oh, here, see, before you go on. A friend of mine contacted me from Qatar earlier on today and pointed out that we should be mentioning more that we're on Spotify.
Good point.
I don't know what difference. I'm a technophobe, but apparently we can be regularly found on Spotify if you're out the country and for whatever reason can't access through your usual channels. Spotify's where to find us. I'm completely unaware of that, amazed by it and delighted to put it out there. So there you go, Dan. We bit of kind of public broadcasting there.
No, quite right. The numbers we get from everyone watching on YouTube is fantastic. We really appreciate the people that watch it. But as Keith says, we're available in podcast form on Spotify and on the podcast app as well. So,
all right, so it's a podcast, is it? Right. Okay.
Aye, it's audio. Aye, so no excuse not to listen to it. If you don't, then why not?
Better with the pictures, Dan, ain't you?
Oh, of course, aye, of course. In the comments that are coming in already, the Bucky Trucker says he's starting with the champions of Scotland or the runners-up. We're actually starting with neither.
This guy's got a bit of a bee in his bonnet, and I'm glad that he watches every night, but you know, look, I mean, I get it as well, because it has been a bit Rangers-centric over the last few weeks, but that's because you might have noticed there's quite a lot going on over there.
Quite a big story,
and there's been quite a big story developing since February time when the Daily Record broke it about the American takeover, and it's been that has been the go-to place for here's stuff that's happening. Celtic, on the other hand, are in a really strong position at the minute, and there is no rush. I've said previously in this show, they don't need to rush into doing any deals that they're not comfortable at doing at this minute in time, and that's why, you know, there is a bit of, you could call it a lack of activity. Maybe some Celtic fans will be starting to get concerned about it, Dan. I don't think Brendan Rodgers will be overly bothered. He's got plenty of time. He doesn't need to conduct a complete squad overhaul, as is required across at Rangers just now. And it'll just be a very selective summer of, you know, little tweaks here and there to make the squad stronger. So that's why, yes, I accept there has been, we have been low on Celtic news stories, but that's because there is no Celtic news stories at this minute in time. There is one that we'll talk about later on tonight, though, with a really interesting, actually, addition to the coaching staff, and I'm sure we'll come around to that, Dan, when you're good and ready. But I think you have something else to start the show with tonight.
Aye, I just thought we should start maybe with Heart of Midlothian, because a very big day in their modern history, because the Tony Bloom investment has been confirmed. I mean, Tony Bloom with Jamestown Analytics, to be honest, from what I can see, and I'm not no expert, but anything he touches seems to turn to gold. I mean, it must be quite exciting to be a Hearts fan today.
And I've said it for months since Tony Bloom first came on the scene. These are exciting times for Hearts. They have to be. I've said about Rangers that the new ownership's in there. They may make mistakes. There may be teething troubles initially. It may have to get worse before it gets better. And I think there could be something similar there with Tony Bloom. He's been involved, but he didn't get the money in, so he was actually having quite a bit to say about, you know, the direction the club should be moving in. And Jamestown was involved in the appointment of Neil Critchley. But Jamestown had also pointed out that Derek McInnes was the man for the job on a whole series of various metrics. And they have got the right man in now. and now they've got the £10 million investment, and they've already been busy in the transfer market. This is really exciting times for Hearts. We've mentioned previously that, you know, I think an effort has been made now to get an answer one way or the other out of Lon Shankland to see if he's going to get on the plane on Saturday to go to the club's pre-season training camp. Derek McInnes has made that a priority since, you know, his first day in the job. And you feel as if it's getting very close to decision time for Lon Shankland. That's another bit that feeds into if Lon Shankland commits his future, I think that's another huge positive for a club which, you know, has that sort of momentum already. So early in the summer, they've got the right manager at last. That they are making clever, astute signings, which has given the squad a better look to it, a better balance. That'll be the plan. And, you know, as we've said, they don't have European football to muddy the waters or you know, congest the early season schedule for them. So it gives them a real chance to hit the ground running right at the start of the season and to lay down markers and say, look, you know, I know the way Derek McInnes' mind works, and he loves it. And whether he's at Kilmarnock or Aberdeen, now Hearts, he goes into games against Celtic and Rangers believing that he can have a wrestle with them in the mud. That's always the intention. And in one-off games, he proved that he could do it at Kilmarnock on a number of different occasions. I think that he goes into this position now really excited by what he's got behind him in terms of a club, the facilities, the data, the analytics, the money, the investment. And he will feel that he can do that on a consistent level now. As I said to you, at Kilmarnock, he could do it in one-off games. Derek McInnes' aim here will be to show right from the start of the season that Hearts are a force to be reckoned with, and that they're going to, you know, lay down something significant this season. I think they will. And as I said previously, you know, knowing the way his mind works, I'll be surprised if he's not looking at the upheaval at Rangers and what's going to be required at Rangers, and he'll have an eye on, you know, getting in between, separating the two, doing something really similar to what Aberdeen did at the start of last season. And having been there, you know, around about Tynecastle, going to games when George Burley had that astonishing start to the season, when Hearts were up flying at the top end of the table, the momentum that the Hearts fans will then provide and get behind their team is monumental and monumentally important. And if you can turn that place into what Derek McInnes has talked about, turning it into, which is a place where it's not enjoyable, it's not a nice place to come. You know, everybody says they enjoy the atmosphere. He's trying to turn it into a place that teams are going to hate going to. And I can see that happening. I think if Hearts can really get off to a solid start to the season, get the points under the belt and build that momentum, I think it could be spectacularly interesting. What might be achievable through there. And, you know, you've mentioned it, Tony Bloom's track record, Dan. Everything he touches just seems to turn to gold. And, you know, I'm not suggesting for a single second that Hearts are going to win the top flight next season, because they won't. But I tell you what, they're going to make it really, really interesting up at the top. I think they're going to add another layer of intrigue to the whole scenario next season, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what that looks like.
In the comments, Luke Skywalker is asking where the £10 million goes. If I can find the comment, there it is. Is that £10 million for investment for players?
I think
Jason says it's more analytics and scouting. Be surprised if they spend a lot. But if it's not for players, I mean, where would the £10 million go?
Well, I think this is the whole point of the investment. It's, I'm going to give you my analytics and my data, algorithms, and then I'm going to back that up by giving you some money to spend. I haven't seen the contract, so I don't know, you know, legally defining black and white positions on it. What I would say to you is, I can imagine what makes sense to me is that he's offering Hearts this technology because he trusts it and he knows it works. And he's then saying to them, and here I'm going to give you some money to play with in the transfer market using my analytics because I know it works. And then I would imagine there might be some, I don't know how it's going to work. Is there a percentage kickback from any profits made from the players that his algorithms identify or his data identifies? Is that where he'll make a return on his money? I don't know, and I'm speculating because I haven't seen what the contract looks like. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was something like that. And that's a win-win. It's a win for Tony Bloom. It's a win for Hearts. It's a win for the fans. It's just an exciting project. And you've seen the success he's had with Saint-Gilloise in Belgium. That's an incredible story in itself. Now, I know that he's not got full ownership at Hearts, but he's going to have a big input. And it's definitely going to be worth watching. And especially at a time where they've got a manager like Derek McInnes in charge of it. I just think it seems as if the pieces of the jigsaw are falling nicely into place. I think it's a fascinating summer for them. And by the way, they have been really busy, haven't they, in the transfer market already? They've just been working away systematically. They've got, obviously, their targets were all clearly defined and set out by the end of last season. And Derek McInnes will be working through that process of just examining what the options are, what the lists look like. And they've not been slow in making adjustments and bringing in new recruits. I just think there's a real energy about Hearts just now, which is going to make them such an interesting view at the start of next season to see how it lands at the start of the Premier League season. I've just got a funny feeling it'll land quite well.
Aye. Well, Paul backs up what you're saying about Saint-Gilloise. He took USG from the second tier to champions in Belgium. Let's see what he can do. And look, I know I'm going to get tons of stuff.
That's a fairy story, by the way, that whole USG thing. It's absolutely astonishing. I mean, we looked into it at the time when Rangers were drawn against them in the Champions League qualifiers. It was remarkable. It is remarkable. What they've done is astonishing. I think I can't remember what it was. It was like something like 50 years or something they'd gone since winning the Belgian title, and they had fallen down the divisions, and they were not much above a sort of junior side. And then this transformation happened, and bit by bit, incrementally, season by season, stronger and stronger, and they developed and made themselves, one of the biggest forces in Belgian football all over again. It was a remarkable story, and I think they were playing in a stadium in the middle of a park in the outskirts of Brussels and all that. It's astonishing. And so if they can do that with a club that was, so far down the Belgian ladder, well, Hearts, they're not far down the Scottish ladder, not at all. They should be up there as the third force in the country. So that's what makes it so exciting. And the fact that Tony Bloom sees the potential in here to really get in amongst it and break up the dominance of Celtic primarily and Rangers secondarily, I think it makes it fascinating.
I know I'm going to get lots of stick for this, right? But I'm going to say it anyway because, with the dream team, Keith, do you know what I mean? We need to be honest to the viewers. I know you said they're not going to win the league next season, right? And obviously they're not going to win the league in the forthcoming campaign. But see, when you look around Europe, right, there's been at least one season since the turn of the century in almost every league you can think of where there's been a complete freak, where the stars have aligned. It's been a perfect storm. France have had Montpellier come from nowhere to win it. Lille, Germany have had Wolfsburg. AZ Alkmaar in Holland, Leicester in England,
Leverkusen,
USG in Belgium. Look, I'm not saying that anyone is going to topple Celtic and Rangers just yet, but 40 years since another team won the top flight. I'm a wee bit kind of surprised that there's not been one season where it's all been a bit mad.
I think the financial chasm is so big, Daniel, that it makes it less and less likely here. However, let's not underestimate what Tony Bloom is clearly kind of minded to attempt to do here. He's putting in significant sums. He's given the club the algorithms which have helped to bring Brighton, and Brighton's a fairy tale story in itself, what he's done there. So there's every reason. It's not as if you're just going in and kind of with a Hail Mary here. There's a back catalogue behind Tony Bloom which suggests he's going to make an impact. And Derek McInnes has got a back catalogue which suggests he can make an impact whether or not he's got analytics behind him, and this additional £10 million investment. I think it's really exciting. As I said to you, I repeat, I don't see Hearts winning the title next season. Let's just be clear about it. But I think they're going to make it really fascinating up the top end of the league. And I also think that Tony Bloom is taking a long-term approach, as he did in Belgium. You know, that didn't happen overnight either. It's a process of building. And Hearts are starting that building from a very strong position, which makes it even more interesting as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how they get on. And as Luke says, anything is possible, which I completely agree. Going back to Celtic and Rangers now. Rangers have confirmed that Max Arens is now a Rangers player. Not everyone, though, is absolutely delighted. Keith, let me hit you with this comment to get us started. Douglas says, hate to be negative, but if we don't have an agreement to buy Arens, then he'll be out of our price range if he does well up here, and we'll be back in the same market this time next year. Although Eddie chimes in saying Arens is instantly the best right back in Scotland. Davey says, Mr. Maid, I can't wait to meet you. Keith here says, Arens better be ready to sit on the bench as no manager will drop Tavernier. A few things to digest there. I mean, do you think that is the end, or not the end, but the end of Tavernier being the first choice right back?
Well, that's difficult to call right now, because until Russell Martin names his first sort of starting 11 for the new season, we'll all be guessing. We'll maybe get a few clues from the pre-season. What I would say is he knows Max Arens, has been keeping a very close eye on him. I think they were together during the kind of closing stages of Russell Martin's career at Norwich. Arens was sort of coming up through the youth ranks and busting onto the scene. And Russell Martin has kept a close eye on him. And I find it fascinating that this is one of the first ones in through the door, or the first kind of Russell Martin signing. So I don't imagine that this boy at the age of 25, so it's not as if he's a youngster. He's at the proper age to expect to be a first-team player. I'm sure that'll be his target. And I think there'll be a real challenge now for Tavernier to keep hold of that right-back slot. It's all going to depend on how, impressive Max Arens is. Certainly from looking at the back catalogue, but as we say, even we look good on YouTube now and again, Daniel. So he looks impressive. He looks exactly what Rangers need. He looks like a young, dynamic version of James Tavernier. So that would suggest that Tavernier might have a genuine fight for his place. The other thing to bear in mind is that this boy Max Arens also plays left back. So
Singing the Blues says that in the comments, eh?
Yeah, so it's interesting that they could have an eye on that. I'd rather suspect that he's there to put up a challenge for Tavernier's place at right back. And it'll be interesting to see how James Tavernier responds to that. In terms, and I get that one of the comments there about what's the point? It's another loan signing. I think Rangers fans, there will be a bit of an attitude here where they've watched Malik Tillman come and go. They've watched Akalav Cherny come and go.
Sima.
And I think that becomes irritating after a while.
Yeah.
I would add the one caveat onto that is that this is a different Rangers board that you're now dealing with. They are in the door. I don't know when the actual £20 million of investment into the football side of stuff actually lands in the bank account. But I strongly suspect that from this point onwards, if Rangers do pick up a player from the loan market who proves to be a success over the first 12 months of his time in Glasgow, that Rangers will be a financial different animal this time next year. And if they want to finance a deal in a very similar way to Celtic have been able to do previously with Cameron Carter-Vickers, people like that, you come up, you give it a try for 12 months. If everybody's happy with how it looks, then you can sit around the negotiating table. Rangers, I don't think, felt that they've been in the position to do that with the guys that we mentioned previously. I suspect that things are about to change in a way that many people won't see coming, because it does feel at this minute in time, and I give you that here's another player coming up on a 1-year loan, probably do really well and then go away again. And that doesn't help Rangers in terms of the sort of longer term development. But it might do if at this time next year Rangers are in completely different financial shape and are able to put an offer on the table which would satisfy Bournemouth's demands. And bear in mind, that figure's not astronomical at the minute, is it?
Aye.
6 or 7 million quid.
Yeah.
So it might be doable this time next year.
Gordon Blackwell in the comments, though, says the euphoria of the Rangers takeover is quickly dissipated due to the appointment of a third-choice manager, an alarming lack of signings. Supporters are being short-changed after renewing their season tickets in hopes of a bright new era. I also think that a law should be brought in to limit the number of loan signings to, say, 3 per club. I mean, I get that Arens is a lone player and they've been linked to other players, Rangers. I know there's a boy at Peterborough that they've been linked with on social media today, Emmanuel Fernandez. He's a centre-half, and I get that they're not the biggest names in the world. But should Rangers fans be concerned by the fact that they've not come in and immediately spent 5-6 million on a...
The fact that they've been linked with 2 Peterborough players in the space of a couple of weeks is probably quite alarming. Listen...
No offence to Peterborough.
I wrote a column online earlier today, Dan, and I'm making it, my opinion on this pretty clear. Rangers have been crying out for this structural change, a complete regime change, a takeover, a new start, a recalibration, a new contemporary modern management structure. These big building blocks have fallen into place with Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marathi. And I believe, from listening to them and from obviously doing a bit of homework and speaking to people around it, I get this really strong impression. These are serious, real professional guys that will take Rangers to another level. Now, whether they're capable of doing that at the drop of a hat this summer, I'm not entirely sure. I have mentioned before that the situation around the team might have to get worse before it gets better, that it might take the Americans time to get a real feel for the environment and get their feet under the table and to have a better understanding of what's really required. There might even be that touch of, and that we've seen it at other clubs that Americans have taken over in Scotland, a little touch of arrogance that they just assume that they know better. And then they find out, then they get up to pace with, and it's a thunderous pace in Scottish football. And eventually the penny drops a little bit and they realise, well, we made certain assumptions that weren't, possibly what they should have been at the time. They discover stuff along the way. I am convinced, what I'm saying is, I'm convinced that these guys are the right guys in the right place at the right time for Rangers. I've no doubt about it. I do wonder how long it's going to take them to get a real feel for it, because I think everybody walks in thinking they know everything.
Yeah.
And this is such a unique place with such a unique environment, and the rivalry between Celtic and Rangers is so intense. I think it does take people by surprise, even though they come in and they think they know it all. I've spoken to countless players, guys that have played with Barcelona, your Ronald de Boers and stuff like that have come to Glasgow and they thought they'd experienced everything that European football could possibly allow them to experience, and then they come here. Yeah. And it's a different thing entirely. And that's why you get all these guys. Henrik Larsson's got such an emotional connection to Celtic, comes back regularly to the club. You've got these, when they play these kind of friendlies, and it's all the kind of old all-star legends matches. You can't wait to get back, whether it's to Celtic, whether it's to Rangers, because there's something about this whole thing that gets inside their system, that gets into their bloodstream. And that makes it unique. And I'm not sure, as much as I know that Andrew Kavanagh is really well-meaning, and Parag Marathi will think that he's got a real good grasp on football in the UK because of his time at Leeds, this is different. And I think over the time they'll realise that. Now, they might get lucky. It might well be that they've absolutely picked the right man in Russell Martin, that Kevin Thelwell's the right appointment, that the players that they're looking at this summer are real gems that walk straight in and make an immediate impact. I'm not so sure. It'll be interesting. The proof will be in the pudding with that. But I think ultimately, over the course, these guys will take Rangers to a level way over and above what has been achievable for Rangers over the last decade or so. So that'll be interesting in itself. Another interesting thing about next season. And by the way, if Rangers are having these early teething problems, how much can Hearts benefit from that? And what can they do about throwing down the gauntlet early in the campaign, as we discussed? So, listen, the new season, it feels as if the old one's hardly ended, Daniel, but there's already so much to look forward to about what's around the corner.
Absolutely. Chip Poker says in the comments, is this all about Rangers? And that actually brings me to the comments that we've got about Celtic, Keith.
Well, we did speak about Hearts.
We did speak about Hearts, Chip Poker. If you can keep up, that would be great. We have got a couple of questions about Celtic, though, Keith. Let me start with this one for you. Stephen says, the clock is ticking on Celtic bringing in a new striker. And with Rangers not bringing copious amounts of new signings, I think that's why Brendan Rodgers is in no hurry. If he's considering Evan Ferguson or Miovski, it's a no-brainer. Miovski ticks all the boxes and knows our league inside out. And we've got a couple of people in the comments as well asking about an update on a left-back for Celtic, because as of right now, there's no news on Greg Taylor or even Schlupp as well.
Yeah.
So still a few things up in the air for Celtic, but I get it's early days.
I just get the feeling that they might not have a problem at left back at all. I know that it did appear for a long while, and maybe it still will happen that Greg Taylor will move on, because there is certainly interesting options on it, in front of him on the table just now. But Brendan Rodgers has kind of repeated, his desire to keep Greg Taylor at the club, and I think there's a discussion to be had and a deal to be done there. It wouldn't surprise me.
You think, Keith, Taylor will probably end up staying at Celtic?
I'm not going to put a percentage chance on it, Daniel, but I'm saying I think that's far from something that should be discounted at this moment in time. I think, knowing Brendan Rodgers, he'll be pushing the boat out. There has been conversations, and I kind of get the feeling there might have been a change of heart along the way somewhere, that whereas previously it might have looked as if Greg Taylor had decided that his interest would be best served in moving away. I'm not too sure that he's still convinced by that. I think Celtic is very much in the mix there. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Greg Taylor did sign a new deal. So that would be, if that doesn't happen, then Celtic will need to find another left back from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned last night about the boy that was at Dundee, Liverpool, name escapes me.
Owen Beck,
thank you. Owen Beck being a potential target for Rangers. Yep. Well, I know for a fact that Brendan Rodgers was really, really interested in taking him to Celtic Park.
Yeah.
When was that? 2 years ago?
I think, was that not in January?
Was it in January?
I think it might have been.
Was it just as recently as that? It just shows.
I think it might
maybe 18 months ago. Anyway, no, it wasn't January, because Jurgen Klopp was the manager, and Jurgen Klopp played him from the bench in a League Cup tie. That's right. And it meant that he couldn't join Celtic in that season, because it would be 18 months ago, the UEFA's 3-club rule. And he ended up going back to Dundee, if memory serves, on loan because of that. Now, I remember being at the after-match press conference. I think Celtic might have been at home at Hibs, and Brendan Rodgers came in to do the press, and literally 2 minutes before he came into the room, we were listening, and Liverpool made that substitution that Celtic were desperately hoping they wouldn't. And I spoke to Brendan Rodgers after the press conference to let him know that had happened. And let's just say, you could tell he was fairly disappointed at it. So if he was interested 18 months ago, it stands to reason that he'd be of interest. He'd be someone of interest to Brendan Rodgers at this point as well, if he does end up in a situation where he's needing a left back. So another fascinating one.
Marzuno says in the comment section, referring to Greg Taylor and Kieran Tierney, he says, Keith, imagine they brought Daniel in to take your job and you're now the T-boy. Would you stay? And it's funny he says that, because I don't know if he knows someone, but that's what's happened, Marzuno. We're going to, I mean, it's weird that he knows that. I don't know if he knows someone on the inside, but that is the update.
Well, it comes to us all. Old age comes to us all, Marzuno.
But no, do you think there's anything in that, in the sense that Taylor is looking at it going, well, listen, I've been the first choice left back. Tierney comes in.
There's no doubt about it. But I think that the conversations that Brendan Rodgers would be having would be saying, look, I get it. You know, you don't want to lose your place. He did lose his place in the team there, but there's another thing that Greg Taylor needs to consider. One, there's the Kyogo factor, and the grass isn't always greener, right? And a lot of players think, I'll make, you know, I want to experience something new, and then they move away, and they spend the rest of their playing days really regretting the fact that they moved away when they should have stayed.
Yeah.
At a club which is regularly winning things, and they miss the buzz, they miss the adrenaline. Again, I come back to these Legends matches. It's why these guys can't wait to come back, Dan. So it's a big thing to move. And yes, I get it that, you know, he'll feel that he should be a regular starter. But we've had this discussion previously. Is there a way of fitting them both into the team? Perhaps. If Kieran Tierney was to play left-sided centre-half in some games at home where Celtic had all the ball, you've also got to factor into this equation the fact that Kieran Tierney's track record, injury-wise, would suggest he's unlikely to play 50, 60 games in a domestic season. So it's almost a job share of that position. And I'm sure that Brendan Rodgers will have been working on Greg Taylor on that because, you know, he's got a guy there that's just ideally placed with the bags of experience, everything required. You know, if you can keep Greg Taylor, well, there's one less risk that you have to make in the transfer market. One guy that, you know, if Kieran Tierney was to break down on day one of pre-season training and you had Greg Taylor for the rest of the campaign, you're perfectly happy with it. Obviously, not perfectly happy that Kieran Tierney's injured, but you know what you're getting. You've got a reliable, tried and trusted man to fill that position. I think that's the way the conversations will have been going, Daniel. And I just get the feeling that Brendan Rodgers, and he can be a very persuasive man, I think that he might be inside Greg Taylor's head a little bit with that. And I think that's why you've not seen Greg Taylor rushing into a decision to go and sign elsewhere.
I guess time will tell. While we're on Celtic, Shawn Maloney has returned to Celtic, not the summer signing we thought we'd see. He's obviously back in a coaching capacity. I think he's replacing Darren O'Day.
Yeah.
He's gone to Swansea City. I feel this is a bit of a weird one because he was obviously manager of Wigan previously. He obviously had that ill-fated spell as Hibs manager as well. But an interesting one to see him back at Celtic.
And I think you'll find that he put his name in for the Dundee job as well just a few weeks ago.
Interesting.
So that is interesting. He clearly has ambitions to become a manager again. But he's really, I think Shawn Maloney is really comfortable and really at home out in the training pitch. And I think the title he's been given, what is it, Pathway to the first team or something like that?
Pathway manager, yeah.
I think that'll get his juices flowing because that's, you know, the route that he took from Celtic's academy into the first team. Really experienced guy, a really intelligent guy. And from everything that you hear, a really highly respected coach. Why do you think Roberto Martin has carried him around the place for a while? Listen, Shawn Maloney's an interesting guy. He's a deep kind of wee guy. He's a sort of deep thinker, very introverted, given that he was such a talented player, expressive player. But he's a real deep thinker. And sage guy who will give the youngsters the best advice. And it couldn't be coming from anybody better positioned to let them know what's required if you want to make it at this club. This is the standard. This is what you're going to have to achieve. This is the work ethic you're going to have to put into it. Because that was one of, you know, Shawn Maloney had many very impressive traits as a football player, work ethic being high on that list. So, yeah, I can see it making total sense from a Celtic perspective. But, yeah, you add the caveat, well, how long is that going to last? Because, you know, if he was applying for jobs a couple of weeks ago, he might still be applying for jobs. He might still see his future back in the front line in management somewhere down the line, and maybe not too far down that line. But I'm sure Celtic will have had to have discussions with him about that, and they must be happy and convinced that, you know, he's here for the longer haul, that he's not using this just as some temporary stopgap fill in until he can get himself back into management. You would think that Celtic would want an assurance of some sort on that, and I'm sure that they'll have received it to their satisfaction. Otherwise, I don't think they would have made the appointment.
Aye, that's true. Well, we're just rounding off in Celtic, Keith. I wanted to get your take on Brendan Rodgers and what is your gut feeling regarding him going into the last year of his contract? As we say, sign a 3-year deal when he came back. The first 2 years have been excellent.
Told you.
Go on.
I've told you to relax. I know that you're getting all on edge about it.
I think a lot of Celtic fans want to know. They want an update on this because I would put it out there. Rodgers is absolutely crucial to Celtic. They need to keep Brendan Rodgers if they want to have ambitions of going on in the Champions League. I mean, I just think he's an elite manager.
I think you're right.
I know Ange's unemployed now, but I think Rodgers is an elite coach.
Yeah, and I think the relationship that Brendan Rodgers has now with Dermot Desmond, with Celtic, with Peter Lawwell, is probably a lot more comfortable and stronger than it was first time around. I think that Brendan Rodgers would be the first to accept that mistakes were made when he left the club, which is why he was so determined to grasp the opportunity to come back and give it another whirl. I think he's realised there's more to life than England's Premier League along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's realised having a really settled family life off the pitch is important to him. I think he realised that from the moment that they relocated to Leicester. I think they missed, as a family, they missed Glasgow terribly. So there's so many things that make Brendan Rodgers 2.0 different from the first version. I think, if I've got it right, he's perfectly relaxed. He said he'd do his 3 years, and he'll do his 3 years. And then I've said to you previously, Daniel, if by doing his 3 years, he's got himself into a position where all of a sudden 10 in a row is back on the horizon as a possibility, that was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime shot, and he walked away from it. I think if he feels that it's a realistic opportunity again, and that this once-in-a-lifetime thing has become potentially a twice-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I don't think he'll walk away from that. I think that Brendan Rodgers and Dermot Desmond will be completely relaxed about his contractual situation right now, and both men have probably got a better idea than anybody else what that means and how it's likely to play out over the course of the next 12 months. Would it surprise me if something was announced before the start of the season to say that something new and improved and longer term has been agreed? No, it wouldn't. But I wouldn't be overly concerned if I was Celtic either if that didn't happen. I think if Brendan Rodgers continues his current success rate at Celtic, he's won 4 trophies out of the last 6. If he continues that or improves it next season, I don't see him going anywhere the following summer. But I don't feel that Celtic feel a major requirement to force his arm or get his position, because I think there's a bit more humility there about Brendan Rodgers, knowing how it ended for him the last time, and some of the damage that was done to his legacy and to the relationships around the club. He won't do that again. He won't put that at risk again. Mm-hmm. If Brendan Rodgers does leave, he'll leave maybe because he set his 3-year plan, maybe because he's absolutely physically, mentally exhausted by the end of it, maybe because he didn't win a title and Celtic wanted to change it at the top. But I don't really see any of that. He seems energised. He seems really comfortable in his own skin. He seems really content and happy with his life at Celtic. But obviously, if Brendan Rodgers signs a new deal just now and extends by 3 years, and by December time, Rangers were 10 points clear at the top of the table, how do you think that works out?
That's a fair point. Aye. We've got a lot of people in the comments section scoffing at the 10 in a row. Scott says no chance of 10 now. PJ says no 1 in 10. I would actually just say, though, if say Celtic get to 5 in a row this time next year, with the financial position they're in, and as I say, with a coach like Rodgers, I think they'd be looking at it going, we've got a great chance to get pretty close to 10 in a row.
Well, it's one of them. If you can get to 5, then it's not that far over the horizon at that point. You've done a lot of the hard yards to get yourself there. You've done half the work.
Aye.
So look, believe you me, if it gets to 5, Brendan Rodgers will start to think, wow, I did have that opportunity before, and I didn't hang around for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be factoring in his thinking. I have no doubts about it. And I know Rangers fans will be looking at it going, "Oh, that's not going to happen. It's going to be the playing field has been levelled by the arrival of Andrew Kavanagh and the American consortium," and I think they're absolutely right. I think it has been levelled. But Brendan Rodgers is still a fair bit out in front. That Celtic squad is still miles out in front. So there's a lot of catching up to do. Mm-hmm. And over the course of that period, who's to say that 4 doesn't become 5, 5 doesn't become 6, and then you're almost within touching distance?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else we should touch on, Keith, while we're on our lonesome tonight? Anything else we should round off with?
A couple of things. I see Livingston are putting a new pitch down, which is great news. Absolutely brilliant news. I'm delighted to see it. And I think congratulations to the SPFL, who kind of went all Donald Trump on them and demanded that they upgraded the playing surface to make it into the Premier League. I think that was the Premiership. That was the right thing to do. The previous Livingston pitch was an abomination.
Aye, really bad.
But I was listening to an interview with David Martindale yesterday, and he was saying, earlier on today, and he was saying this one is of a similar, if not even better standard than the pitch that Falkirk have been playing on, that Airdrie have been playing on, and these are top-notch synthetic surfaces. So we don't like plastic pitches in the top flight. So, but if we have to have them for a period, then let's make them the very best that they can be. These are the very best. This is, I don't know, 5th gen or whatever you call them. Mm-hmm. But it should make the games as spectacles far more enjoyable. And it should be far more enjoyable for players to go and play on it. I'm sure that David Martindale quite liked the fact that nobody wanted to go and play in that pitch, and it was a nightmare for teams, and he probably resents the fact that he's been forced to put down, something that's a carpet by comparison. But I think it's better for Scottish football. It's better for the image of the game. And I think, I looked at the Falkirk pitch a couple of times. It was actually hard to tell if it was grass or plastic. And it will be great for Livingston to upgrade that pitch to that extent. And, it should be a better experience for the supporters that are going to watch it on a weekly basis. And that's the most important thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Also, Elvis, Big Stephen Presley, Elvis in the building at Dundee, going through, putting his players through their pre-season work. Their League Cup campaign will start at the weekend, and he's talking about, producing a more stable version of Dundee where you don't have to make 10, 11 changes every summer. But he keeps saying it, and I quite admire him for it, although he looks a bit like Kenny Rodgers. he is saying repeatedly, he knows in order for there to be stability, he needs to win football games. And that's another one that's going to be really interesting to keep a close eye on at the start of the season. Can Dundee get out the blocks under Stephen Presley? Because I think they're going to have to, because there was, let's say, a bit of resistance to his appointment on Tayside. So what he needs, and he's absolutely right to identify it, is he needs to get off to a solid start, get points on the board, and show that the appointment was the right one. So, that's going to be interesting as well. Really, so many things to whet the appetite. And we've got, I know that the sort of early stages, the group stages of the League Cup are almost upon us already, but it won't be all that long, Dan, before people are pulling their boots back on for the real stuff.
No, absolutely.
We're getting there,
And it's Arbroath that Dundee are away to at the weekend in their opening League Cup game. And as Keith says, there's plenty to whet the appetite, and we will be here to cover it all as it unfolds, the wild world of Scottish football. Thanks for all the comments, and thanks for getting involved in the discussion. If you want to do it all again tomorrow, we'll be back at 6 p.m.
Remember Spotify,
that's right. Aye. We're available in podcast form as well on Spotify and the podcast app. And Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Yes, my pleasure was all mine, Dan. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Aye.
Any chance you can come into your work?
Sorry, Keith, you're breaking up. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you can join us tomorrow. Cheers.